How many times have you wondered if the lessons you learn in school will be important in the real world? Have you ever wondered why school requirements are the same for everyone despite the fact that different students want to study different things? Why are all students expected to learn the exact same way?
In this day and age, there has been an excess of students and former students complaining that the modern school system has failed to prepare them for life after high school and college. In addition, many students have reportedly studied and have underperformed in the traditional education setting. These two recent trends are both connected to the American value of freedom and serve as an example to how freedom is not nourished enough in our modern education system. Does the traditional liberal arts education system really promote freedom for everyone? Yes, as I'm sure we've all heard 1,000 times, school is evil for trapping kids inside of school and making them learn when they want to have fun. I'm not trying to sound like everyone else complaining about school, talking about how it's ruining kids' lives. I simply want to illuminate how school contrasts against an idea of American freedom that has been ingrained into all of our minds since day one. In order to understand how exactly schools are neglecting the American value of freedom, it is important that it is emphasized what exactly freedom in the broader sense of American identity is. The Merriam Webster dictionary defines freedom as the right to use something or go somewhere without being controlled. For our whole lives, we have been taught that America is a free country. Everyone is entitled to the American dream, and everyone is entitled to live life how they want to live life without being controlled. However, modern schools have consistently been failing to provide students with the skills, knowledge, and experience that is required in order to live fulfilling lives in our constantly changing world. As said by Keith Mays in his article To Find Success, Students Need More Real World Skills, published in 2021, only 2 out of 10 students feel high school has very much prepared them with the skills they need to join the workforce right out of high school. As cited by Maryland State Delegate Dr. Cha Wu in his article The Flaws of the Modern Education System and How We Can Address Them, published in 2024.
Also, according to Census.gov, in 2023, 11.1% of Americans are living under the poverty line. That is over a tenth of the American population living in poverty. Schools focus too much on educating students on skills that are only relevant to specific careers. Take, for example, math class. That is a core class in most high schools, even though most math at the high school level is only relevant towards one specific career, whereas instead of teaching kids skills that are only relevant to a certain career, schools should focus more on providing students with knowledge on how to succeed and survive in a country where a tenth of the population is in poverty.
In addition, school does not nurture as much creativity as it should in the classroom setting. I personally remember being a young child sitting in a classroom with my mind wandering. And I remember the teacher telling me to focus instead of letting my mind drift off. Instead of nurturing my imagination and creativity in a way that would have been productive, I was told that it was distracting and I needed to learn in the exact same way as everyone else in the class. And part of that is how American freedom is not being nurtured in the classroom setting.
Learning to think independently is probably the most popular idea of freedom in America, and learning to think for oneself is a key part of growing up. However, the modern school system neglects the foundation of creativity and teaches you what to think instead of how to think. as said by former teacher John Taylor Gatto when talking about the modern school system in his article Against School published in 2003. The aim is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same level, to breed and train a standardized citizenry, to put down dissent and originality.
In addition, academic pressure to perform well has taken its toll on students. A recent study from the CDC has found that 11% of American children ages 3 to 17 have been diagnosed with anxiety, 4% of American children have been diagnosed with depression, and 40% of adolescents aged 12 to 17 have reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness in 2022. Students are not free to express themselves educationally. Students are not free from academic pressure and hardships that happen to them in school, and students are not free from the difficulties that they face after their education. I am here with.
Hi, I'm Sarah Taylor. I am a collections manager and also senior educational program administrator at the University of Connecticut.
What does freedom in education mean to you? As I've done my research for this project, I've looked very closely into the real definition of freedom and what that looks like in education. There seems to be this big idea that freedom is about what constrains you, what holds you back. And the idea of freedom is there's nothing holding you back. You are free to make your own decisions. What does that kind of idea look like to you in education?
That's a good question. I think that kind of freedom would look to me like students having a lot of opportunities from which they can choose their path, follow their interests. I think that that kind of freedom also means having a lot of opportunities to challenge yourself.
Given that you are an educational specialist at the college level, do you think that high school succeeds in preparing students for life after high school?
High schools right now are working to try and meet the needs of students as they go beyond high school. But I also see that a lot of students are sort of unprepared for the college environment in terms of being independent. Sometimes students are struggling with basic skills. And I also know that because of budget cuts, a lot of classes that were things that were available to me as a student in high school here in Connecticut potentially are not available to everybody anymore. Like my high school had an automotive repair class. We also had shop and we had home ec, which I know are like really old-fashioned terms.
So you talk a lot about how you had a lot of different classes that were available to you in high school. And it a little bit sounds to me like you associate having diverse opportunities to be the idea of freedom in education. Since you say you have observed that there's been a bit of a decrease in those resources, would you say that over time there has been a dip of freedom at the high school level?
I don't know, but I think that's certainly a possibility. And I think it's also really important to engage with students and see what they think about what their options are, what they think freedom as a student looks like.
Do you think that new inventions like AI or phones or the internet or whatever have impacted freedom in education?
Oh wow, that's a really good question. AI is an emerging problem. It actually restricts creativity and freedom. So I'm not really a big fan of AI.
If you could change something about the current education system, what would it be at the high school level?
Approaching each student individually with how they learn best, but I think that things like experiential learning and individualized studies have some potential to improve the experience for students and also teach students how to be successful independently. I also think that schools, high schools in particular, could focus in on teaching students specific skills like how to take notes or how to pay bills or how to go grocery shopping.
A very common symbol of the illusion of freedom in America is F. Scott Fitzgerald's iconic character Jay Gatsby in his classic novel The Great Gatsby.
Published in 1925. In The Great Gatsby, the main character Gatsby was an Oxford man, or someone who took the traditional route of studying hard and getting a college degree in order to carve a successful life for himself. On the surface, Gatsby is depicted as nothing less than a perfect, high-class individual. However, he wants nothing more than a deeper sense of freedom and fulfillment, which is depicted through the famous green light symbol in the book. The book symbols around how Gatsby slowly and gradually declines from his longing for a deeper sense of freedom. The story of Jay Gatsby is meant to illustrate the real-life dynamic of the suppression of freedom in education that stems from the suppression of freedom during education.
Gatsby's Oxford education failed to prepare him for the hardships he would face after his education, much like how our modern education fails to prepare most of its students for life after high school. Many people argue that school provides students with knowledge and the opportunity to study a variety of subjects that interest them, and there is some truth that some writing assignments do require creativity, such as creative writing assignments. However, connecting back to the Webster definition of freedom being the right to go somewhere or do something without control, schools have complete control of where, when, and what students learn. In addition, the current curriculum undoubtedly does not empower or provide students with knowledge they need to have freedom in their adult lives. In order to solve the problem, the whole design of the school system should be remodeled in order to accommodate the students' need to be free and creative. For example, schools in Finland promote self-reliance. The curriculum is determined by the teacher and they're not uniform. Every teacher gets to choose how the class is taught and explains it according to them. Furthermore,
according to a report from ABC News in 2020, Finnish students who only spend 20 hours a week in school still outperform most other countries in educational performance. Our liberal arts education system should be modeled similarly to the Finnish education system because their education system focuses on nurturing each individual's creativity and independence rather than relying on one curriculum per class for the sake of efficiency.
according to a report from ABC News in 2020, Finnish students only spend 20 hours a week in school and still outperform most other countries in educational performance. Our liberal arts education system should be modeled similarly to the Finnish education system because their education system focuses on nurturing each individual's creativity and independence rather than relying on one curriculum per class for the sake of efficiency.
Finally, in order to live a free and fruitful life after your education, it is important that you do your own research about key topics that school most commonly does not teach children about. Teach yourself about financial literacy. Teach yourself how to pay bills. I know that's something Sarah Taylor said in the interview. And it's important that you work on your creativity
and how to think for yourself and be creative. Another thing John Taylor Gatto said in his article Against School: school trains children to be employees and not consumers. Teach your own to be leaders and adventurers.
All right, that's enough.
Okay.